It is dark before the city wakes. You are standing inside the house of God, and there is no window anywhere. The only light in the world, right now, is the oil burning in the lampstands behind you. 10 of them, 5 down each wall. Their gold-reflected flame turns the carved cedar ceiling amber. The smell of the previous evening's incense is still in the stone. Not quite smoke anymore, something thicker. Something that has no name outside this building, because no one outside this building is permitted to burn this compound. This smell belongs only here. You are a priest. You have passed through the gate between Jachin and Boaz. You have crossed the threshold into the Hekal, the holy place, and everything you see is gold. The walls, gold. The floor, gold. The ceiling above the carved cedar beams, gold. You cannot find stone anywhere. You cannot find raw wood. You could search every surface in this room and not find the material the building is made of, because the building is not the point. What the building contains is the point. At the far end of the room, 30 feet away, is a set of olive wood doors. You know what is behind them. You are not permitted to open them. That room belongs to someone else. Here is what they don't tell you about Solomon's temple. The building was assembled in complete silence. Not a single hammer or chisel was used on site. And there is a reason that has nothing to do with engineering. The innermost room of the temple is a perfect cube. So is the New Jerusalem in the book of Revelation. That is not a coincidence. Every priest who served in the holy place walked on gold, not stone, not wood. Gold, from wall to wall, ceiling to floor. The incense burned twice a day was a legally protected compound. No one else in Israel was permitted to make it. To replicate the smell of God's house was a crime. And when the Ark of the Covenant was placed in the Holy of Holies, its carrying poles were long enough to be seen from the outer room. A permanent visible thread connecting the daily priestly world to the presence behind the door. These are not footnotes. These are the rooms. This is what it actually looked like inside. This is what it felt like to stand there. Walk with me. The Temple Mount was engineering before the building even began. Jerusalem sits on uneven, rocky terrain. The mountain the temple occupied required a leveled platform, a massive artificial foundation, cut into the hillside, built outward, creating a flat, elevated surface above the city. You climbed to approach it. You could not simply arrive. Every worshiper who came to the temple felt the ascent. You would have heard it before you saw it. From the city below, the sound of the Levite choir carried on the morning air. Voices trained for this, assigned to specific psalms for specific days of the week. And beneath the music, something else. The sounds of the outer court. Animals. The great bronze altar in the courtyard already burning. The smoke rising from the sacrifice, visible for miles across Jerusalem. Then the smell hit you. Blood and burnt fat from the altar, cedar and cold stone in the morning air, and cutting through everything, faint but distinct, the incense from the morning offering drifting out through the temple entrance. Before you reached the entrance to the house, you had already experienced it. With your ears, your nose, and the ache in your legs from the climb. At the entrance to the temple itself, 2 pillars, not connected to the building, not supporting the roof, standing free, 18 cubits tall, approximately 27 feet. Their capitals adding another 7.5 feet of carved lily work above that. Each capital wrapped in 2 rows of pomegranate chainwork, 100 pomegranates per row, 2 rows per column, 2 columns. They were cast in the Jordan Valley by a master craftsman named Hiram of Tyre. Not the king, the craftsman. a man described in 1 Kings as skilled in bronze, gold, silver, iron, stone, and wood. He was a man of mixed heritage, Israelite mother, Tyrian father. He stood at the intersection of two worlds, and he built the gateway to the house of God. The right pillar, Jachin, he establishes. The left, Boaz. In him is strength. They held nothing up. They were not structural. They were a declaration. Every priest who entered the temple crossed between two named attributes of God before reaching the door. The architecture spoke before anyone inside it could. Through the entrance, past the ulam, the vestibule, only 15 feet deep, and into the hekal, 60 feet long, 30 feet wide, 45 feet high. Every surface, cedar. The walls were paneled floor to ceiling in cedar from Lebanon, not as decorative cladding as the entire visible interior. The stone building underneath was completely hidden. Then the cedar was carved, gourds and open flowers across every panel. Then the carving was overlaid with gold. The floor, cypress planking first, then gold. The ceiling beams, cedar, then gold. The walls, cedar carving, then gold. The text is specific about this. No stone was seen. 1 Kings, chapter 6, verse 18. It was not an approximation. It was an architectural objective. You should not be able to find the material the building was made from. The building's structure was irrelevant to the experience of it. You were inside something that should feel categorically unlike everything outside it. A room 60 feet long, 30 feet wide, 45 feet high, with no windows. The only light from 10 lampstands burning olive oil. 5 along the north wall, 5 along the south. The gold reflects the flame. The ceiling is gold, reflecting gold. The carved flowers and gourds cast moving shadows as the oil flames shift. This was not bright. This was amber and warm and deep. You come from the outdoor courts. Noise, sunlight, animals, smoke. And you step into something that absorbs sound and glows. 3 pieces of furniture in the holy place, and each one was doing continuous work. Against the north wall, the golden table of the bread of the presence. 12 loaves, one for each tribe of Israel, set out fresh every Sabbath. The old loaves given to the priests to eat. The bread was always there, always fresh, always 12. The nation's 12 tribes were permanently present in the holy place, whether any individual Israelite knew it or not. At the center, the golden altar of incense. Twice a day, morning and evening, a priest entered the hekal alone. He carried coals from the outer altar and burned the sacred compound on this altar. The incense was made from 4 specific ingredients in equal parts: stacte, onycha, galbanum, and pure frankincense, with additional salted ingredients, ground fine. Exodus 30 states it explicitly. This formula was not permitted for personal use. Whoever makes incense like it to enjoy its fragrance must be cut off from their people. The smell of God's house was protected by law. Nobody in Jerusalem could replicate it. When the incense burned, the smoke rose in the lamplight toward the carved cedar ceiling. The holy place held it. Against the walls, 10 golden lampstands, burning continuously, 5 on the north, 5 on the south. Their light fell across gold walls in a room built to reflect light inward, not release it. The theological grammar of this room was deliberate: light, bread, and smoke. The lampstands, the showbread, the incense. 3 constant daily signs that Israel's God was present and being attended. The bread was for the tribes. The incense was for God. The light made it possible to see both. David organized the priests into 24 rotating divisions. Each division served for 1 week, twice a year. All divisions together for the major festivals. On any given week in Jerusalem, there was a specific priestly family on duty, and their week was built around a precise daily rhythm. Before dawn, the first priest entered the Hekal to tend the lampstands, alone, in lamplight, checking oil, trimming wicks, beginning the day inside the gold room while the city still slept below. This was not ceremony, it was maintenance. It happened before anyone would see it. It happened for God. Then the morning Tamid. In the outer court, a priest selected a lamb at dawn, confirmed it without blemish. The smoke rose with the sun. Israelites across the city could look toward the Temple Mount and see it. The day was officially begun. Then the morning incense inside. The same offering every morning, never skipped. The smell was already in the stone before the first worshiper arrived. Josephus, writing in the 1st century, describes the incense fragrance spreading across Jerusalem each morning. Even those who could never enter the building lived inside its smell. The Levites served in the courts, the broad, open areas where ordinary Israelites could gather. They maintained the building, carried vessels, guarded the gates, and sang. Their voices were the sound of the temple to everyone outside it. The priests, specifically the sons of Aaron, could cross into the Hekal. They lived inside the gold room with a regularity that most Israelites never experienced. And beyond the olive wood doors at the end of the Hekal, the Holy of Holies, one man, one day per year. The high priest on Yom Kippur, entering the perfect cube in total darkness, carrying blood from the outer altar, standing before the Ark of the Covenant. The building was a gradient. The further in, the fewer who could enter. The rarer the access, the greater the weight of what lay beyond. The architecture was a map of holiness, drawn in cubits and thresholds and specific bloodlines and specific days of the year. Most Israelites experienced the temple from the outside. They heard the choir, they watched the smoke, they smelled the morning incense drifting across the city, the gold room, the incense, the lamplight. That was for God, attended by priests, witnessed by almost no one else. That was not a failure of access. That was the design. In the outer court, between the temple entrance and the bronze altar, the Molten Sea. A bronze basin 10 cubits across, approximately 15 feet in diameter, and 5 cubits deep, resting on the backs of 12 bronze bulls. The bulls were arranged in 4 groups of 3 facing north, 3 facing east, 3 facing south, 3 facing west, their hindquarters toward the center, their heads facing outward, presenting the basin to the 4 directions of the compass. 12 bulls, 12 tribes, 4 compass points, 3 tribes per direction. The same arrangement as Israel's encampment in the wilderness, preserved now in bronze beneath the sea. 2 Chronicles states the purpose. The sea was for the priests to wash in. Every priest who bathed before entering the temple stepped into water held up by the whole nation, in bronze, in arrangement, permanently. Personal purification was not a private act. It was carried by everyone. The basin was cast by Hiram of Tyre in the Jordan Valley clay between Sukkoth and Zarethan. The valley's dense clay could hold molds at this scale. It traveled to Jerusalem already finished. Alongside the Molten Sea, 10 movable bronze stands, each with its own basin, used for washing the offerings. 5 on the south side of the court, 5 on the north. The temple's logic was consistent throughout. What appeared inside in gold appeared outside in bronze. The lampstands inside, the basins outside. 10 inside, 10 outside. Everything doubled. Everything in pairs. Everything balanced. You washed in bronze before you entered where gold was. The materials themselves mapped the gradient of holiness. Now, the part of the temple nobody pictures. Wrapped around the outside of the Hekal and Devir walls was a 3-story structure of rooms. Bottom story, 7.5 feet wide. Middle story, 9 feet. Top story, 10.5 feet. The rooms widened with each level, not because the outer wall expanded, but because the main temple walls stepped back as they rose, creating ledges on which the side chamber beams could rest. That ledge detail matters. The beams of the side chambers never penetrated the temple's inner walls. The interior of the holy place and the Holy of Holies was never pierced by a structural member from outside. The sacred walls were structurally self-contained. Scholars estimate 30 rooms per floor, 90 chambers total, used for priestly vestments, temple vessels, and the accumulated treasury. Behind the gold room and the incense and the choir was a functioning institution of organized storage and supply. The temple was not only a sanctuary, it was a working system. 1 Kings, chapter 6, verse 7. No hammer, chisel, or any other iron tool was heard at the temple site while it was being built. For 7 years, the most complex building in Israel's history came together without the sound of a single iron tool at the construction site. Every stone was dressed at the quarry, cut, shaped, and finished miles away, then transported to Jerusalem, ready to be placed. When the blocks arrived, workers positioned them. No adjustment, no trimming. They fit. In the ancient Israelite understanding, iron meant weapons. A tool that could shape stone was made from the same material as a sword. Exodus 20 had established the principle. A tool used on an altar defiles it. Solomon extended that logic to the entire building. The house of God would be assembled without the sound of violence in any form. The silence was not an engineering constraint. It was an act of worship built into the construction method. When you stood at the Temple Mount during those 7 years, what you did not hear was as deliberate as everything you saw. No archaeological excavation has ever been conducted on the first temple itself. The Temple Mount is one of the most politically sensitive sites in the world. The layers of construction above the First Temple period, the Babylonian destruction in 586 BCE, the Second Temple, Herod's massive expansion, the Roman destruction in 70 CE, and centuries of subsequent building have made direct excavation impossible. The physical evidence of Solomon's temple lies beneath all of that, and for now, it remains there. This is worth saying directly. The absence of excavation is not absence of evidence. It is an absence of excavation. What we have is indirect evidence, and it speaks clearly. Excavated beginning in the 1980s in what is now northern Syria, the Ayin Dara Temple, built between approximately 1300 and 740 BCE. Its layout is nearly identical to the biblical description of Solomon's temple: a vestibule, a main hall, an inner sanctuary, comparable proportions. The inner sanctuary floor at Ain Dara bears enormous carved footprints, the footprints of a deity approaching the holy space. One footprint is 3 feet long. The theological language is the same as the temple's. The innermost room is where the divine presence stands. Solomon's temple was not an architectural invention. It was the definitive Israelite expression of a sacred architecture tradition that existed across the ancient Near East. What made the temple different was not its form. What made it different was who it was built for. Additionally, at Megiddo, Hazor, and Gezer, all three listed in 1 Kings as Solomon's building projects. Archaeologists have found 6 chambered gate complexes following the same architectural template, identical designs at 3 separate sites. Centralized royal building programs in the 10th century BCE. The period is real. The building program is real. The architectural tradition is documented. The specific building awaits excavation. The olive wood doors at the far end of the holy place opened for the high priest once a year into the Dever, 20 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, 20 cubits high, a perfect cube. The floor of the Holy of Holies was raised above the floor of the holy place. Steps descended into it. This means the room's ceiling was lower than the holy place's ceiling, creating a deliberate architectural drop that made the cube exact. 20 cubits on every dimension. The geometry was intentional. No windows, no lampstands, no natural or artificial light of any kind. The high priest who entered on Yom Kippur crossed from the warm amber lamplight of the holy place into absolute darkness. 2 figures stood in the darkness, each carved from olive wood, each 10 cubits tall, approximately 15 feet, each with a wingspan of 10 cubits. Their inner wings met in the center of the room, touching above the midpoint of the floor. Their outer wings stretched to the north and south walls. The combined wingspan of both cherubim was exactly 20 cubits, touching both walls simultaneously, filling the room from side to side. They were not posed dramatically. They stood with their faces toward the entrance, toward the holy place, toward the priests who served outside. These were not guardians barring entry the way the cherubim guarded Eden's gate. These stood as witnesses. Their wings covered what lay beneath them. Beneath them, on the floor, at the precise center of the cube, the Ark of the Covenant. After the Ark was placed, the priests withdrew. The olive wood doors were closed, but there was something that could still be seen from outside. The Ark's carrying poles, the long wooden staves through the rings on the Ark's sides, were long enough that their ends projected through the entrance of the Dever and were visible from the holy place. The text records it specifically. The poles were so long that the ends of the poles could be seen from the holy place in front of the inner sanctuary, but not from outside the holy place, and they are there to this day. The priest who entered the Hekal each morning to tend the lampstands, burn incense, change the showbread, could look down the length of the gold room past the 10 lampstands and see at the far end the poles of the ark visible through the doorway. Not the ark itself, not the cherubim, not the golden cube of the inner room, just the ends of 2 poles, visible in the lamplight, a thread, a permanent sign that what had been carried through the wilderness, what had led Israel in a pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud, was in there, still present, still carried in form, in poles that remained extended, even in rest. The ark was in the Devir. The priests emerged. 120 priests stood with trumpets at the east end of the altar. The singers stood with them. The trumpeters and singers made themselves heard as one voice, praising, thanking, declaring that God is good and that his love endures forever. And the moment they did, the cloud came. 2 Chronicles, chapter 5. The temple of the Lord was filled with the cloud, and the priests could not perform their service because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the temple of God. The Hebrew word is kavod, weight, presence, substance. The same word used in Exodus 40, when the cloud covered the tabernacle at its completion. The same cloud, the same word. A permanent dwelling now, instead of a portable one. The silence of the 7-year construction. The cedar dressed at the quarry and assembled without a hammer blow. The gold poured over carved flowers in a room built to be unlike anywhere else. The 12 oxen holding the water for the priests to wash. The 27-foot columns at the door with God's name on them. The perfect cube in the darkness with the cherubim touching both walls. The poles still extended, visible through the lamplight. All of it for an occupant. And the occupant moved in. Here is what stays with me about the shape of that room. Revelation 21 describes the New Jerusalem, the city that comes down from heaven at the end of the age, as a perfect cube. 12,000 stadia on each side, length, width, and height, all equal. The same geometry, the same proportion, the same architectural statement. Solomon's architects were not reading Revelation. Revelation was not written yet. But when John, exiled on the island of Patmos centuries later, was shown the shape of what God was building toward, it had the same dimensions as the room where the ark rested beneath the wings of the cherubim in the darkness. The temple was not just a building, it was a scale model of what God was moving toward. Every priest who served in the lamplight of the Hikal, every worshiper who climbed the hill and heard the choir and smelled the incense from outside, they were standing next to a preview of eternity, rendered in stone and cedar and gold. 3,000 years before the original arrives, the priest who tended the lamps each morning, alone before anyone else arrived, in the gold room in the lamplight, could see the poles of the ark at the far end. He wasn't permitted to go further. He served where he was assigned, but the poles were visible. What does it mean that God arranged things so that even those who could not enter fully could always see the sign that the presence was still there?